Perfect. Now,
Jorge, can people chat with me? Can they send me questions or not?
No problem.
Okay. And if they can type in Spanish if they want, and maybe somebody can translate for me. Okay.
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 ahora sí.
You changed your name.
Buenas tardes, yes. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Carol Dorado. En esta oportunidad vamos a empezar con el evento denominado Cómo las crisis alimentan la creatividad y la innovación. Evento que no sería posible de no haber sido gestionado por la Universidad Mayor de San Andrés, cuyo representante es Jorge Velasco, en esta oportunidad director del Hub de Innovación e Innovatec. En este webinar tenemos como invitado especial al doctor Jay Rao, quien es profesor de Estrategia e Innovación en la Universidad de Babson. Fue miembro, consejero asesor de diferentes instituciones y organizaciones por varios años. Tiene muchos proyectos en los cuales ha trabajado, así como publicaciones realizadas en diferentes temas. Él es un experto en tema de innovación, estrategia, creatividad, gestión de riesgo, y la verdad sería mucho tiempo el que me toma describir su biografía. Realmente es una eminencia y un placer para nosotros el que pueda darnos unos minutos del día de hoy para esta conferencia. Jorge, te cedo la palabra, por favor, y posteriormente ya empezamos con la presentación. A todos los asistentes les invito a usar el chat que se encuentra en la sala de conferencias para que hagan sus preguntas, que las vamos a leer al finalizar la ponencia. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Caro. Hello, Jay. It's a pleasure to be with you at the Expo Bolivia. In this conference organized by Hub the Innovation at UMSA. I was your student in I was your student in the 2012 at Babson College, and since then my dream was to bring you to Bolivia to share with my fellow entrepreneurship and businessmen. Today is an honor to have you to share all your knowledge on art and innovation. Welcome and get ready with your conference there, Jay.
Jorge, thank you. Thank you very much for your invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with all of you today. Of course, I accepted because of Jorge's invitation, but also because for Bolivia, because mi concuñado is de Cochabamba.
And today is Cochabamba's anniversary.
So I'm doing this. Qué pena, mi español es muy mal, ¿ok? Casado con colombiana desde 26 años, pero soy un mal estudiante. Y por eso yo continúo en inglés, ¿ok? But I can understand when you ask questions, quiet, like slowly. And also, if somebody asks questions in Spanish, Carol or Jorge, you can help me with the translation. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
I want it to be dynamic and let people ask questions. Okay. And so let me share my screen. And Also, let me know if my audio is okay. It's fine. Okay. Can you see my screen now? Excellent. So today the topic is crises and creativity, right? And we all know that the last 18 months have not been easy for any of us. And this is not going to be the last crisis. Perhaps this is a crisis that has impacted globally, okay? And it has impacted us for the longest, maybe, okay, in our lifetimes, okay? So we need to understand what is happening and how we are behaving in this time. So if you kind of look at what is the big takeaway for this particular presentation is, what is the relationship between crisis and creativity? Also, at times it has different words, application, innovation. And what are innovators' DNA? How do we get creative? What makes us creative? So these are the types of questions that I'm hopefully going to respond to. When World War II ended, Boeing, the very famous company, all of its efforts was towards the war. But when the war finished, 90% of its revenues were gone. And it has to lay off 70,000 people. It was a big crisis for them. But at that moment, Boeing started a new project. And that new project was the Boeing 707. And that changed world travel. It was the dawn of a new jet engine era and completely made the world much smaller because of that one project. If you take the entire country of Cuba, when the Soviet Union collapsed, their exports evaporated, lost all its creditors, and foreign trade evaporated. But at that moment, they had to make some big, tough choices. They threw open their beaches. They had to go against their values. They privatized the beaches. And they started allowing international tourists to come to their beautiful beaches. But they had to completely compromise their own values about who they are. In a smaller scale, this is a hospital in Bangkok. And during the economic crisis, they lost 90% of their customers. They had put a lot of money into a completely new facility, $100 million. And there are a lot of loans and empty beds. But at that moment, they had to make a decision how to survive. And they threw it open to medical tourism. And today, Bumrungrad Hospital is the #1 medical tourist hospital in the world. 500,000 people go there from other countries to get treated in this particular hospital. But that came out of that crisis. If you take a smaller example, Carmen was a very exclusive, fancy restaurant, three restaurants in Medellin, Colombia. And when the pandemic happened, 100% of the customers were gone. But what did Carmen do? Carmen immediately changed the menu. She went into comfort food, bandeja paisa, frijoles, chicharrón, pizza, arroz con pollo, all comfort food, and online, and completely turned the business from high-end to regular food. People had to wait for 2 hours to get food delivery from Carmen. That was the amount of business Carmen was getting. So during times of crisis, we do become very creative. In fact, I'm sure you're seeing a lot of creativity and innovation happening just around you, in your own companies, in your own businesses. So if you look at Dyson, which makes vacuum cleaners, they started making ventilators. NASA jumped in and started helping with the coronavirus efforts. Google and Apple came together to help in contact tracing. So big competitors, you would never expect them to be cooperating. So during times of crisis, we see that we behave in things that we never thought we would do. So COVID-19 has given us this shock therapy, a jolt. A Cincinnati hospital, for children hospital, they were doing 2,000 video telehealth visits in 1 year. But after the COVID, they're doing 5,000 per week. So if you ask somebody, nobody would have predicted that they would do this. A company in Dubai trained 1,000 people in 2 days to do completely new jobs. Best Buy is an electronics retailer in the United States. They were testing curbside pickup. They were just doing a few tests. But when the COVID hit, they took 1,000 stores and rolled it out in all the 1,000 stores. So these type of stories, you have seen a lot of how we have become very creative in a very short time. Even before the pandemic, if you look at physical retail in the United States, there were many companies going bankrupt because of online purchasing. So this is before the pandemic. In the 3 years before the pandemic, you saw many big companies go bankrupt in the physical retail. And that continued in the COVID. But even before the pandemic, if you go to the website and type opportunities in retail, you would see lots of opportunities for new physical retail, even when there are lots of bankruptcies going on. So even in the worst of times, you will see there are opportunities. The word crisis comes from the Greek word krisis. Krisis means it's a point of decision making. You have to take a decision. The word in Mandarin for crisis is weiji. Weiji means the same thing, opportunity or crisis. Okay, so in every crisis, there is an opportunity and there is creativity. So in the United States, you're seeing there's a big jump in the number of startups that are happening in the United States. Usually the number of startups is very stable for 30 years. But in this pandemic, the number of startups has just jumped like crazy. So what is happening? How is that helping us? How is that working? So let's go and analyze how people get creative. How do we get to be creative? We are all creative, okay? But how do we get there? How do we make it even better? All right. So let's look at some famous people and how they became creative. Also, the word is application innovation. What is that application innovation? There are many ways to innovate. There are many ways to change the game in the market. But one of the most common ways of innovation is application innovation. 90% of all innovation globally is application innovation. What is the meaning of that? It's taking something that works in one industry and you apply it to a different industry. You take something that works in one country and apply it into a different country. That's the meaning of the word application innovation. Okay? And that is also linked to creativity. How are they linked? If you look at application innovation, GPS existed in aircraft ever since satellites have been up in space. But GPS is now coming to your hand. What did Tesla do? Tesla, we have lithium ion batteries in our cell phones, right? So Elon Musk said, we can take these lithium ion batteries, put thousands of them, and put it under the car. That's what Tesla did. Okay. So taking the same thing, but applying it in a different place. There's a very famous company in the United States. It's called Southwest Airlines. It's a low-cost airline. It's also the grandmother of all low-cost airlines in the world. Whether it's Ryanair, EasyJet in Europe, or Indigo, or AirAsia in India and Far East, and similar to some low-cost airlines in Latin America. They all look up to Southwest. Southwest, when it was born, there was a crisis, there was a lawsuit, and they could not operate. But they didn't want to waste time till the lawsuit was finished. So what did they do? They went to another company called Pacific Southwest Airlines, and they bought their training manuals, they bought their operating manuals, they sent their people to get trained in that company and copied everything. So the founder of Southwest Airlines said, we don't mind being called copycats. We copied Pacific Southwest completely. You can call us a photocopy. Few years later, Southwest was going bankrupt because of oil prices. There was an oil embargo in the Middle East. And at that time, they had 4 planes. So the financial officer, CFO, said, we have to sell 1 plane to survive, otherwise we'll die. But they didn't want to decrease the number of passengers that the company was carrying every day. So they wanted to carry the same number of passengers with 1 less plane. So the idea was to reduce the amount of time the planes spent at the airport. So they come to the airport, they get the people out, they get the baggage out, they fuel the plane, clean the plane, and put the baggage and the people back out. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So if you want to learn how to do that very well, who will you go learn that from? Who will you learn it? Will you go to McDonald's, Domino's Pizza, NASCAR, Formula One? Who will you learn this? How to do? They went to NASCAR. How to learn how to do this very quickly. Today, many hospitals, they send their people to Formula One to show how to manage, to see how to manage the emergency rooms in the hospitals. Henry Ford, do you think he got a dream about how to do an assembly line? Actually, he was at a slaughterhouse. He was visiting a slaughterhouse and he saw all the animals moving in a track. And that gave him the idea, saying, I can do an assembly line for the cars. Google PageRank, they rank all the web pages. They copied that from the academic citation index. Disney Magic Band, they copied from the new Nike Fuel Band. Apple Genius Bar, they copied from the 5-star hotel concierge desk. Jorge, you need to answer this. What's the most famous love story in the world? And some of you can also put it in the chat if you know the answers. What is the most famous love story? It is Romeo and Juliet from Shakespeare. But it was not an original work. It was a copy. Hamlet, his other famous tragedy, also copied. Macbeth was copied. King Lear was copied. Othello was copied. Merchant of Venice was copied. None of them were original works. Of course, he changed them, made it beautiful language. Bob Dylan, very famous American singer, his first 25 songs, none of them were original, all copied from somewhere else. The Nobel Prize winning economist, Richard Thaler, has said, I created my career stealing ideas from psychologists. So if you want a Nobel Prize, copy and steal. Walt Disney was copying all the time. Right? When he wanted to create Disney World, he went to Tivoli Gardens. He went with a team of people. So they copied the entire layout, came back to California and built Disney World. Picasso was famous for copying or infamous for copying. Okay? When he moved from Malaga in Spain to Paris, all the other artists were very afraid to show him their work because he was copying everything. Now, when you think of pirated books, counterfeit wines, mislabeled products, no standards of quality, no regulation, what countries do come to your mind? When I show this globally, everybody says China, or many people say India, or Brazilians say it's Brazil. Actually, this was the United States. In the 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, this was the United States. But this was Japan after World War II. This was Taiwan and Korea in the 1980s. Today, it is China. All countries go through this period of when they are copying. But today, if we look at what's happening in the US, Amazon is copying Alibaba, a Chinese company. Facebook is copying TikTok. Almost everybody is copying TikTok. Steve Jobs has mentioned many times that he copied some of the best ideas from around the world and put it into the products that made Apple. I want to be very careful. Originality is very important. Unique products are very important. Patents are very important. You should always try to create unique things. But we cannot magically find them immediately. It's not where you start, it's where you end up. One of the most famous Mexican painter is Frida Kahlo. And some of you may have gone to Mexico City, to Casa Azul. And in the early days, when she was very young, Frida Kahlo, the parents knew she had great talent, but she never had any training in painting. She never had any formal teacher in painting. So at the age of 13, they decide to bring in a teacher for Frida Kahlo. And the teacher looks at all the work, what Frida has done, and he says, wow, this is great. You're very creative. You're very talented, no doubt. But then he says, stop being original. Copy the masters, and you will become even more creative. So when the pandemic started, I started looking for what is happening globally. And one of the first things that I saw in China, this is February 25, 2020. This is the early days of the pandemic. And what had happened was that small restaurants, they did not want to fire their employees. So many small restaurants got together and they were lending their employees to larger companies where online shopping was actually increasing. So what happened was that when they saw these small companies were doing this, larger companies also started to make sure they didn't fire their employees. They were lending their employees and they were sharing employees with companies. So big companies like Meituan and JD started copying what the smaller companies were doing. And so that copying is so important. And then I went to India, and this is February. So they had seen the Chinese company and they had started to do the same thing in India, how to share employees and not fire people. Let's go back 100 years during the Spanish flu, the big pandemic that happened 100 years ago. And what happened in Philadelphia and St. Louis is completely different. The number of deaths in Philadelphia was 16,000, whereas only 700 people died in St. Louis. Why was that huge difference? Because in the Philadelphia, the director of health ignored all the warnings. The director of health did not listen to the experts. And he threw a big parade, a huge party. And that thing went out of control. But in St. Louis, what happened was completely different in St. Louis. The health commissioner, Max Starkloff, the doctor, he said, we should not let this pandemic enter the city. Even if it comes in, we have to minimize the number of deaths. So immediately he engaged the entire community of the city. He engaged many institutions, schools, medical societies, universities, and local services, and brought people from a variety of different places to cooperate, to make sure that they kept the pandemic out. Did he get this in his sleep? How did he learn how to do that? That's because he had seen his father do this. His father was a US Army surgeon, and then he was sent to Germany as the US consul to Germany. And when he got to Germany, there was a big pandemic. There was a big cholera pandemic in Germany. So he made sure that nobody was going to the United States on these big ships and boats who had cholera. So he had set up processes to make sure that the cholera didn't spread. So what the St. Louis Health Commissioner did was copying his father many years ago. And that is where we have failed during this pandemic. We have not copied enough from some of the bright spots from around the world. So copying is the starting point for creativity. The more we copy, the more creative we get. The faster we copy, the more creative we get. There is research. The research is very clear on this. This research has been done with many entrepreneurs, with many inventors, people who have many patents, scientists, and also serial entrepreneurs, people who have created many businesses. And they have certain skills they use again and again. One is they're constantly questioning the status quo. They know that there are always better ways of doing things. They're also very good at observing and listening. We all observe and listen, but these innovators, these inventors, these entrepreneurs, they observe and listen without bias, without prejudice, without prejudgment. And for us, for many of us, it's very hard to do that. And the third thing they do is something called associative thinking. What is that associative thinking? It's connecting the dots. Okay. I have seen this before. I've seen it in a different industry. How do we bring these things together? Well, the word associative thinking is a fancy word. Consultants and academics use big words like associative thinking or application innovation. But what do I say? Whether you use the word positive deviance, benchmarking, inspiration, bright spots, I say copy and steal legally. Okay, because that is going to make you much more creative. Please start there and you will become more creative. And so if you go to this website called COVID Innovations, you will see in this website, in every industry, what are the new innovations that are happening? So I'm just giving an example of airlines copying from some of the best bright spots around the world. So you can go to this website and then you can copy some of the best ideas and get started immediately. Instead of trying to come up with original ideas, please copy and steal legally. So let me stop here, and I'm going to take questions, comments from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you for your presentation. So I'm going to read the questions. Well, we don't have any questions yet.
Okay. Probably English may have been an issue, right? How many people did we have?
We have more than 100 people in the virtual room. Yes.
Okay. We started with 100, and how many was at the end? 20?
So I'm going to say in Spanish that they can ask questions. Okay. Participantes, por favor, pueden hacer consultas usando el chat. Yo ya les he ido escribiendo en el chat. Pueden usar eso para hacer consultas. Adelante, Jorge.
Sí, Jay, tú bien dices que copiar puede ser muy útil para empezar un proceso de innovación. Y en ese orden, ¿cómo estamos los latinoamericanos comparado con los otros países? ¿Cómo es Latinoamérica? ¿Cómo es Colombia versus Estados Unidos o el Asia, digamos que China, que ha hecho mucho de esto?
It is improving. Latin America is getting better. So if you look at Mercado Libre, they do a lot of things what Amazon does, right? Okay. And if you go to Colombia, I cannot chat with everybody. I cannot send my message to everybody, Carol. I don't know why. Okay. Because I want to type some examples so that everybody can know. For example, in Colombia, there is a company called De Uno. Okay. De Uno is a copy of the German company Aldi. It's a hard discount retail store. And they took everything what Aldi was doing in Germany and they brought it to Colombia. Okay. And it's growing very well. And once De Uno started, Justo y Bueno, Ara, many other companies also started to do this. There's a very famous company from India called Oyo. Oyo is in the hotel business. They take 2-star, 3-star hotels, which are not very well run, not very well managed, and then they go help them make it really well, clean it up and set standards and do a lot of inspection. And they brand the hotel saying Oyo certified. And that has a lot of venture capital funding from Silicon Valley. And what happened is Colombia, a company called Allenda, did exactly the same. And so Allenda is growing in Colombia and growing in Peru. Okay. And they got also funding from the same companies that gave money to Oyo. So there are venture capitalists who are funding even the copycats because they understand the power of that copying. So it is happening in Latin America.
Bien, pero siempre cuando encontramos una empresa latinoamericana, siempre ponemos como problema el mercado, el tamaño del mercado es muy pequeño. ¿Esto es real? El ecosistema hace mucho para poder llegar a tener unicornios como se tiene en Silicon Valley?
No, don't look for Silicon Valley for answers. Okay? It is easy to fall in love with Silicon Valley. But many times, Silicon Valley is a different world. Okay? Look for great solutions in your own neighborhood. Look for solutions that has worked in Chile. Look for solutions that has worked in Colombia. Look for solutions that has worked in Peru. And you can do it. Bolivian companies can do that. Okay? And don't look to the United States for answers. You may get some ideas, but look at how success happens in your own backyard. Okay, so Rappi in Colombia. Yes, it is successful today, right? And for example, there's a company called Crepes and Waffles in Colombia. And Crepes and Waffles is a fantastic company. They only employ women, single mothers, and they have built a great franchise. Okay. So look for bright spots in your own backyard. We have a lot of Venezuelan students at Babson. And I always ask them, give me one bright spot in Venezuela. Tell me one company that's doing great, even today in a bad situation. And everybody tells me the same name from Venezuela. And the name of that company is Polar. It's a grocery chain. Everybody loves Polar. So even in the worst situation, there are bright spots. Is that clear? So look for bright spots in your own backyard first. That will give people, si se puede, we can do it. Is that clear? That it's not just Silicon Valley. Okay.
Thank you, Professor. We have a question. And it says, in Bolivia, Latin America in general, we are entrepreneurs by necessity. Usually we create traditional enterprises of food and etc. In your opinion, these types of traditional ventures, firms, are going to fail because they are not digital?
Yeah, we have to be very careful. If you take all of Silicon Valley business models, if you take all digital business models in the developed countries, they're only 9% of the economy. I repeat, 9% of advanced economies. Nobody tells you that. If you take boring manufacturing, producing food, producing cars, producing motorbikes, producing clothing, today is still 20% of the economy. De Uno, that started in Colombia, has nothing digital. They don't even take credit card. It's all cash. Is that clear? There are companies that are doing very well in chocolates, in milk, in food. There are great examples in your own neighborhood of companies who have scaled. Entrepreneurship is not about starting businesses. Entrepreneurship is about scaling businesses. Anybody can start a company, but 99% of all companies don't scale. In Latin America, 99% of all companies have less than 10 employees. So the problem is not digital. The problem is skills to scale. Okay? So where do you learn the skills to scale? So we need to give our entrepreneurs the skills to scale. But where do you learn it? In the university? No. You learn the skills to scale at a large company. When you work for a company which has 500 employees, 1,000 employees, that's where you learn the skills to scale. So first go work for a larger company, understand how to manage people in a larger company, understand how to solve problems in a larger company, then go create your company. And the probability of success is much higher. Okay? Just because you have an idea, don't start a company. Okay? Any ass, any burro can do that. Okay? That's why most companies die. Okay? So whether it's a university, whether it's a government, whether it's an incubator, whether it's a hub, your job is to help people get skills to scale. That is entrepreneurship. Okay? That's what creates jobs. That's what drives economies. Okay?
Thank you, Professor. In your opinion, what's the role of the universities in the process of innovation and challenges?
Number one, expose them to the world. Expose them to the best ideas in the world. The first is awareness and exposure. Not just Silicon Valley. Stop talking about Silicon Valley garbage. Is that clear? Expose people to businesses in Africa that are growing. Expose people to businesses in India that are growing. Expose people to examples of your own companies which have done well. Okay? You have to become proud that, yes, we can do that. I love one company from Arequipa in Peru. It's a chocolate company. It has one of the best, Liberica. It has fantastic chocolate, right? And so universities have to write case studies. Stop doing stupid theoretical garbage publishing. Is that clear? Write case studies of your countries, your examples, and so people can be proud. So stop trying to, there are some things you should stop copying. Don't copy the US university model. That is rubbish. Useless theoretical garbage. Is that clear? Write case studies of, not of Silicon Valley, your own countries. That's how universities can help. Rather than kind of trying to, there are some things you have to copy from the US, but not everything. Is that clear? Be careful what you're copying.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Some students ask for, they want to know more about the sandbox and how does it complement with innovation.
So sandbox, I mean, an incubator is a sandbox, okay? Universities can create these sandboxes, but you need the help of large companies who have coaches and mentors for these sandboxes, because it's the large companies who have the abilities to provide resources for the sandbox. Government can do a few things, but government cannot solve all the problems. Universities can do a few things. They can't solve all the problems. So you need an ecosystem that creates these sandboxes. You need the government, the universities, the large companies, okay? For profit, not for profit, all of them come together to create this sandbox. So you need resources, and it's not just money. It is coaching for skills to scale. So, of course, universities play a big role in providing that sandbox where diversity of thinking comes in, and you have the freedom to experiment, and you have the freedom to fail and learn, right? Because inside a large company, it's difficult to fail, to experiment.
Thank you, Professor. Okay. Here comes another question. How can we make bridges between innovation and ID from universities with firms, enterprises, to make them work together and innovate together if there's no confidence between these two parts, university and firms, enterprises?
Now, one of the most challenging tasks for large companies is hiring the people, hiring really talented people, because everybody's resume looks very good on paper, right? What is a better way of getting good connections? Internships at the end of every year, after the end of the first year, second year, third year of university. Give students internship. Don't pay them, but get to build a relationship. Also, give students challenges to work on, to solve problems for the large companies. So how well they solve these problems, these groups of students, so you get to know them. The students understand the challenges of a large company, and professors have to be involved in that, because that is research. That is also relationships, writing case studies. And so those are all the things that have to be done together. It's not one solution of relationship, right? It's a multitude of ways in which large companies have to work with universities, because universities are still the best source of employees, right, for large companies. Okay. So how do we make sure that we are having lots of different types of relationships, right? Now, the word innovation is to be very careful. The word innovation is highly abused, highly misused, highly overused, right? But when you take, whether it's product innovation, process innovation, business model innovation, marketing innovation, there's only one thing common to all types of innovation, and that is problem solving. So at the heart of all innovation is problem solving. And companies, large companies, always have problems. And so students have to get involved and understand these problems. Professors have to be involved in these problems so that what they teach in the classroom is much more real. Right? So many times I don't even use the word innovation, because at times it's abused and misused. Okay. So it's problem solving.
Thank you, Professor. The two last questions, because we are running out of time. So besides the exports, could you please tell us another form to have a major scale of sellings? Or the thing is that in our countries, we must to focus on projects for lower segments or local segments.
Start there. Start with the locals. Start with the poorest. They are beautiful grounds for innovation. Okay. Everybody wants to do export. Everybody wants to sell to the United States, and you neglect your own markets. That is the big problem I see in Latin America. You neglect your own potential customers. You neglect your own bottom of the pyramid. Okay? That is where you should start. So why did China become so powerful? Today, India is becoming very powerful. Why? Because in the early days, they were solving problems for their own people. Even Japan built cars for themselves first. They built refrigerators for themselves. Same with Korea. They built for themselves, for their own population. And then they went to Europe and to US. Not immediately go to the US. Is that clear? So the first mistake people make is, oh, I have to go global. No, first build for your market internally. Okay. Why? I know a company called Alpina. It's a Colombian company. It's a Nutresa is a Colombian company. They are now all over Latin America because they knew how to do it very well in Colombia first, and then go to Venezuela, then go to Panama, then go to Argentina, then go to Chile. And now they're coming to the US. Is that clear? Okay. But they became very strong first inside the country. Whether it is Japan, whether it is Korea, whether it's China, first they built products and services for themselves using local money, not American money, not venture capital from abroad. Is that clear? Local large companies, local people gave money to start these businesses. So think local, start local, and that will give you build capabilities slowly before you go out.
Thank you very much. And the last question, Jorge, cultura en Bolivia. You are going to tell me, me vas a decir después a qué te refieres con la barrera de cultura. But banks here in Bolivia want to innovate, but our culture is a barrier in question of time or formation. Yes, formation. But cultura, Jorge, ¿a qué te refieres?
Problema. La cultura de innovación, la cultura de emprendimiento.
Okay, thank you.
I have been to 40, 50 countries. Everybody blames the culture for lack of innovation. Okay. Everybody blames the national culture for lack of entrepreneurship. Okay. Now, but every country I have gone to, there are great entrepreneurs. Okay. In every country I have been to, there are great companies. Okay. So the job of the media, the job of the university, the job of the professors to take these examples and write about it. Okay. That is the starting point. Because your own people don't know what is the greatness of your own countries. Is that clear? Okay. That's because you're always trying to write about Silicon Valley. You're always trying to write about Facebook or Google or Apple. Okay. So in every country I have been, there are great entrepreneurs. In every country I have been, there are great innovative companies. Unfortunately, I don't know Bolivian names. Is that clear? But if I go, when I ask in Chile, people say, we are very proud of Codelco. We are very proud of Cencosud. We are very proud of Garces, Agricola Garces. We're very proud of Crystal Lagoons. People are proud of these companies. Okay. But at the same time, they complain, our culture is not good for entrepreneurship. Our culture is not good for, not true, not true. Okay. Right. So, write about your companies, write about your entrepreneurs, get people to be proud, then see, say, boy, there, I can do it too. It will change slowly, slowly, slowly. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jay. It was a pleasure to be with you. And muchas gracias a todos los que nos han acompañado en este webinar. Gracias, Jorge. Gracias a través tuyo a la Universidad